Joined by the journalist and political commentator Jade Azim, the editor-in-chief at the News Movement, Becca Hudson. A very good morning to you both. Merry Christmas as well.
Merry Christmas.
Here with us for the next few hours to go through all of the stories. And first up, Becca, we've gone for the Times front page and Maxwell sought pretty fun girls for Andrew. This is coming from the latest sets of details from the Epstein file release. Of course, we should say that Andrew Mountbatten-Windsor denies any wrongdoing.
Yeah, so this is over like 130,000 pages of documents revealing some pretty sordid details about someone who signed off their emails and was based at a place called Balmoral, and the implication being that that could have been Prince Andrew, the former prince, and loads of details about kind of him working with Ghislaine Maxwell to potentially and allegedly procure young women to give him kind of walking tours of Peru. And you can kind of triangulate some of the details that we've had from this tranche of documents. Which kind of, points to Prince Andrew being at least having having that relationship with Epstein that we've sort of known about. There's also lots of details in there about President Donald Trump as well, him being on, I think we call it the Lolita Express, which is a pretty gross phrase, but these are these kind of flights that were taking people to Epstein's island. I think he's on at least 8 flight manifests, which is obviously kind of more contact than we thought, and Trump has certainly ever kind of acknowledged. And the House Democrats just kind of keep releasing these documents, and it's really interesting kind of, what information is being chosen to release when. We obviously had over the weekend loads of details about Bill Clinton and his kind of relationship with Epstein. Again, him denying all kind of any allegations of wrongdoing, and appearing in these photographs or appearing in these documents doesn't necessarily mean that you're responsible for any wrongdoing. But it's this kind of, it just keeps coming, this deluge of information. And, like you say, leading most of the newspapers this morning, the potential involvement of Prince Andrew.
And Jade, I mean, it's interesting, clearly this another batch of hundreds of thousands of pages, as Becca mentioned. A lot of it, though, still redacted.
Yes.
And I thought it was interesting in James Matthews' piece earlier, that is obviously very upsetting and disappointing to some of Epstein's victims.
Yeah, it's a deep injustice. I think I saw recently several pages which is entirely blacked out. And this has political implications as well. There is political injustice here. Allegedly, of course, there's a lot to be said about Donald Trump's involvement. So it really is a matter of, both political accountability, but also justice for the victims. So it remains to be seen if we get any more information. But from what we already have, there is quite a sordid amount of detail.
I mean, on top of that, Becca, clearly this has only come about as Congress passed a law to force the Department of Justice and therefore, by implication, the Trump administration to release so much. One wonders whether there'd be so many questions about the redactions had that been a decision made automatically as opposed to one that felt forced, because clearly there are no precedents of releasing this volume of information, and there could be legitimate reasons for some of the redactions.
Yes, yeah, and I think absolutely when we think about kind of, the women and the survivors of what was happening here, I think there probably are some really strong and compelling reasons to redact some of this information for the protection of victims and for the lives that they've gone on to live. But equally, like you say, it does feel kind of highly politicised, and we had, the instances of some images being taken off the DOJ website, off this is all available on this huge database that you can query, and, journalists and reporters, including your team, who have been doing an amazing job of kind of sifting through, like you say, all this information. But you're right, it does feel like obviously it was a reluctant release. Trump then kind of pretended he was OK with it. It's all been really messy. And to your point, the redactions do kind of suggest, potentially that sort of justice isn't necessarily being served.
Obviously, President Trump has denied any form of wrongdoing too, and the Department of Justice has backed that up with their own statement. Let's move on to the next story, which is a classic sort of dump the story just before Christmas, hope it doesn't get coverage. We're going to make sure that's not the case. Jade, you've gone for the Telegraph's take on this. It's in all the papers. And their title is "The 11 Days That Drove Starmer to IHT Retreat," of course, referring to this change in the IHT rules for farmers after a year of campaigning.
Yes, something of a Christmas gift for farmers after many moons of protests. If you're in London at all, you can often hear the horns of the tractors. So it's been a real big push from the farmers. So now the story is that they've increased the threshold from 1 million to 2.5 million. This goes from affecting 75% of excluding 75% of farms to 85% of farms, and also that the rate is 20% rather than this suggested 40%. This is a significant climb down and a significant U-turn from the government. They expended quite a significant political capital. One way of reading it is that, you know, after the budget, there was actually some significant scope. There was obviously a lot of fallout on the OBR on whether that black hole existed or not. But they've obviously sort of had to find the cash behind the sofa, as it were, to try and regain that political constituency after what was a significant months and months of protest.
Becca, it's really interesting, the timing of all of this. There's some talk that this was the Prime Minister intervening. He and Number 11, though, are saying that it was done in unison. But clearly it's quite soon after the budget when it wasn't done, and therefore it does open up that kind of question of whether the Prime Minister was forcing the Chancellor towards doing this, or whether collectively, together, they were forced once again by their backbenchers to do something that they hadn't originally planned to do.
Yeah, well, isn't that exactly what it feels like? To your point, you know, we're kind of weeks out from a budget when this all could have, you know, this all could have been announced and dealt with then. Instead, to your point, we have that really public protest and kind of consistent lobbying efforts on behalf of farmers. You know, you could not get around Whitehall without bumping into a tractor, which is kind of unusual and quite memorable. And absolutely, like you say, this is yet another example of where the backbenchers have been able to kind of, you know, completely, you know, misdirect and redirect, you know, apparently kind of government strategy. And, you know, and kind of getting it all out on Christmas Eve on the kind of hope that everyone's too busy watching Love Actually to notice, you know, was a high-risk approach, wasn't it? But unfortunately, like you say, Wilf, we're giving it a very good airing.
Well, we will be talking next hour as well to the Shadow Environment Secretary, well, not next hour, in the 8 o'clock hour, from the Conservatives, Victoria Atkins, as well. But just sticking with that story, Jade, one thing I think is really interesting, because you pointed this out, obviously they introduced this a year ago in Rachel Reeves' first budget, that 20% inheritance tax would apply to farmers rather than normal 40%, and it would be cut off at a certain threshold. They're increasing that threshold to 2.5 million.
Yep.
All the reporting, including the NFU I saw yesterday, the National Farmers Union, on various interviews, are saying that will now mean it only applies to 85%, up from 75%. Even 75% is quite a high number. And I think it actually speaks to how effective the farmers' lobby is. You know, they've got great props. You mentioned that, you know, they bring tractors into central London. That it was never something that was universally going to affect all farmers in the first place. And you kind of, again, it's a sort of comms point, largely, for the government and for the farmers. And over the last year, the farmers unequivocally have won that communications battle.
It's fascinating because actually this does only affect, and did only affect, the most wealthy estates, quite objectively so. But to your point, you know, they're a really big political constituency, and it's a matter of, you know, most people felt sympathetic because, you know, these are working farms, or so it may seem. And to your point, actually, on the backbenchers, quite a sizable amount of the Parliamentary Labour Party also represents rural constituencies. So there's a very strong chance that also massively impacted Number 10 and HMT.
Yeah. Anyway, they've clearly not wanted coverage of it based on when they slipped out. It cost about 110 million, so they've got to find the money for that in the new year. But it's, again, not hugely expensive, which raises the question of whether it was worth it for all of the political pain over this topic over the last year anyway. Next up, Becca, page 5 of the Daily Mail. We're doing both stories here, actually. But firstly, King Charles.
Are you looking forward to the King's speech tomorrow?
I am indeed. Not quite as much as my mum is. We absolutely have to stop the day to watch it.
OK, well, we'll try...
Live. She thinks it's live.
Well, that's the magic of television.
Yeah, let's not ruin the magic.
Yeah, let's not ruin the magic.
Let's try and do a sort of spoiler-free version of this story then for your mother. So we've kind of got first look at what the Christmas message will be tomorrow. It comes from Westminster Abbey. The kind of theme of the message will be around kind of a pilgrimage. I suppose you can kind of infer from that what you want. But I think kind of what's most interesting about this is that this is the second year he hasn't done his speech from behind a desk, which I think probably removes all the kind of politics as to which photos are in the frame, does he have a Harry and Meghan photo, blah, 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 because we can all spend lots of time talking about that. I certainly have. But it's kind of today is the day for Christmas messages. We obviously had Keir Starmer releasing his, which was all about kind of the cost of living and making sure that, you know, people kind of reach out and the sort of sense of community over Christmas. And Kemi Badenoch's also done hers. So I wonder when you're going to release your Christmas message.
Well, I think this is it for 4 hours this morning.
Oh, OK.
And then I'm off. From 10 a.m, I won't be doing anything further, for sure. don't plan to be in a state to deliver one.
Excellent.
Either.
Perfect.
But no, I mean, I think it is such a great moment. I guess I was just thinking as you're saying that, I guess all the politicians purposefully released theirs the day before.
Yeah.
So as not to tread on the King's thunder.
Yeah,
on Christmas Day.
I think that's kind of quite flattering of how interested people are in what Keir Starmer's got to say tomorrow. But I think you're right. I think out of respect for this, we get theirs today.
But either way, as you said, the sort of headline this morning being that he's in Westminster Abbey, looking very well in this photograph. Yeah. We're looking forward to it. I will say as well, Jade, I've felt in his couple of years of doing it, he does nail the delivery.
He does, and he's actually very animated, and you can tell he's a very passionate king about certain topics, whether it's a net zero or you know, interpret this however you want, but he's genuinely passionate when he speaks, and I think that does shine through.
I agree. It definitely comes across. Some tips for all of us that have to deliver messages on screen, I think, there. We're also going to hit, as well, the story below. On this page of the Daily Mail, page 5.
Happy Easter, I suppose.
Yeah.
This story about Poundland just releasing Easter eggs. I believe it might be today that it was noted that there were some Easter eggs in the Poundland on some high streets, which suggests that, you know, holidays keep coming earlier and earlier.
And to one customer here that is quoted saying, "Oh my God, Christ hasn't been born yet," and they're selling his, selling his resurrection. Which I have to say, I rather badly was not my first thought to think of the meaning behind all of this. I was just thinking, yeah, how odd if on Christmas Day you were handing out eggs rather than, you know,
it's a bit of a spoiler alert, isn't it, really, when you
other
think
chocolates are available. But yeah, a little bit of a spoiler alert to the story to come as well. But there we go. You know, as long as there's chocolate on Christmas Day,
yeah, quite.
I don't really care about the shape, do you?
No.
But fair point there from one customer from Sheffield there with the legitimate question about the messaging. Now, Guardian, page 9, CDs back at Christmas. Is this really a thing?
This is really a thing. I think nostalgia might be having a moment. So this is John Lewis reporting that there's been a 74% increase in the sales of CDs this year. Do you have anything that you could play a CD on anymore? I feel like all that infrastructure is not something any of us own anymore.
It's a very good point.
Discman or anyway, but yeah, I think it's all to do with this sort of, you know, people have
Discman.
Do you remember Do you remember
No, it
that?
wasn't. Was it 2 words? You'd really pronounce that as...
This is
Discman.
Discman.
How long since we've had a Discman? But I think the Guardian make the point that it's this kind of this sort of love for nostalgia, people wanting to kind of own and have a kind of tangible experience with music that they love. You know, there's been lots of kind of great press or bad press about kind of how streaming is so bad for your favourite artists, and actually having that kind of experience of listening to something and sort of taking it home and unwrapping all the paper and stuff maybe is quite jolly.
But I mean, the question I have for this is will CDs be loved by music purists in years ahead like vinyl has been? I mean, I have to say I'm more of a practical... I don't really care that much for anything sort of like that. I just listen to the music as long as it can play it. But is that also implied here or not?
It feels right. This is this Alpha's vinyl. I quite like this one. Over half of Gen Alpha know how to use a CD player, which is quite funny, actually.
Incredible.
The only shame I was thinking about this is I did quite recently, clearing stuff out in my mum's house, get rid of a lot of DVDs. I wish I'd not, if there's value to these things. Anyway, we're out of time for this hour. Guys, thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
We're out of time for this hour more broadly. On the show, we'll be back with all the day's top stories after this.
What's the best thing about being a Sky News presenter?